Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. Today, I'm chatting with Christina Pennell-Goetze and Bianca Neri, our very first scholarship recipients for the Women Who Lead Certificate Program. In today's Spotlight, we are focusing on the unique challenges that women face in pursuing a leadership pathway in education. In the full-length episode, Christina and Bianca share their experiences working towards leadership and how the Women Who Lead program is helping them recognize all the ways they're already demonstrating leadership capacity. So many women struggle with imposter syndrome and feeling like they're not yet ready to lead. This conversation is an insight into the ways that we can reframe our thinking and make the leap into leadership. To hear the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. If you're feeling like the path to leadership is hazy for you, you're going to love Women Who Lead. Women Who Lead is our 8-module online certificate program designed for aspiring and growing leaders, featuring the voices and experiences of over 70 successful female leaders from around the world. Seeing and hearing from successful women in leadership from schools around the world will help uncover and clarify the unique pathways to leadership that are available to you. Take the next step in your leadership journey with the support of a global cohort inside Women Who Lead. Registration for our next cohort is only open from the 2nd to the 16th of May. Don't miss your chance to join. Find out more at edurolearning.com/women. All right, welcome back to another episode of Coach Better. I am super excited to be here with my 2 scholarship recipients for the Women Who Lead program for 2020. I have Bianca and Christina here with me, and we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about women in leadership and our paths to leadership and what that looks like and feels like as a woman seeking a leadership position, particularly in international schools, because you both are in international schools. To get us started, I'm going to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about your education journey. Where did you start? Where are you now? And then we'll go into your professional goals. So let's split those into 2 separate questions. Tell us your journey first, and then I will follow up and ask about your goals. And just because I see you on my screen, I'm going to ask Bianca to start. Will you start and tell us about your education journey, please, Bianca?
Sure. Hi. I actually started as a volunteer teacher in Honduras after graduating my bachelor's degree in international affairs. So I was looking for a way to marry my interest in international development and education, which I kind of accidentally came across while studying in Washington, D.C. So I was a volunteer in Honduras and didn't know kind of what to do with my life, 20-something, and having to pay off debt. So then I switched from being a volunteer to another kind of private school, bilingual school, not international, in the city near where I was volunteering, and then wanted to get my teaching license because I was thinking about going back to the US. So happened upon a program that would allow me to get my master's and certification while abroad. And then happened upon, I can't even remember how, the concept to Google international school in X country. I don't even remember that moment of realizing that was even a thing, international teaching. I have teachers in my family, but they're all in the US. So I don't even remember how it occurred to me that this was a career option. But I just sort of happened upon education, happened upon international teaching, and away we went. And then, so that's kind of my serendipitous journey to where I am now.
It is fascinating when you think back to when did you first find out that there was such a thing as being an international school teacher, and when people who have never heard of it before, and then you explain to them, they're like, wow, that's possible. That's amazing. So we're very lucky because I think we've all been in it for pretty long. So I feel like we all lucked out there hearing about it pretty early. All right, Christina, can you tell us about your education journey, please?
Yeah, so mine is pretty straightforward in terms of my education journey. I studied a Bachelor of Education in Australia, and as soon as I graduated, I was always fascinated with, working overseas and traveling overseas because Australia is so far away from a lot of the world. So I traveled to England and I started working in England like a lot of Australian teachers do. And I did supply work, but I managed to get a maternity cover in England teaching film and drama. And from there, I actually met my now wife. And because she's German, we decided to move back to Germany. And that's how I was introduced to the world of international teaching. My university actually was associated with an international school, but I didn't really know much about it. And because I was just so new to everything education, I kind of just put that in the back of my mind. But moving to Germany, it was definitely an eye-opener into the world of international education. And I've been here now for 7 years working in Germany.
Okay, so I did want to ask you about what has been holding you back, because both of you talked about really always having the interest in leading. And I think I heard that from a lot of women who lead too. What has been holding you back? What's stopping you from getting to that place that you want to be so far? And I think we could probably talk about this for several hours. So maybe hit on some highlights and we can dig into a couple of those and maybe talk about some that you share or some that you kind of both see and then kind of go from there. And I will ask Christina to start because you're still on my screen.
Yeah, so I've already spoken so much about representation. That's just so important to me. But I think one of the things that kind of held me back initially was, like that representation not being there. But on top of that, when we began our family and when our daughter was born, I think my priority totally changed. And I was like, okay, I'm going to focus more on my family and make sure that I just focus on them and focus on what I can do in the classroom, and just kind of had my small little bubble, what I could control in that moment. I think you mentioned that as well, Bianca, control within the classroom. And so I think that's with a lot of women as well. As soon as they have children, that's just one extra barrier that's in their way, because traditionally, women stay at home with their families and they look after their kids, and their male counterparts just continue to progress and progress and progress and then get promoted and promoted all the way to the top. And, you're still back where you kind of began because you had children and you then have to look after them, at the weekend. I mean, they're your kids, of course, you're going to look after them. But, it's just an extra obstacle that you have to overcome. And while I love my family, that's just something that I think men don't think about. And I don't know if it's their fault, because society just kind of deems it that way. And no one pushes the boundaries on what should change and what should be the norm. It dates back so far that to change that would require some huge overhaul of our mindsets, of how the structures work and how they're in place. So I think just for me personally, having a family was about like an obstacle, but I realized, just like Bianca said, I want my daughter, I want my now son to also realize that, family is really important, but I am going to progress in my career as well. I'm also able to put myself forward, because if I don't do that, if I don't think about other people apart from just my family, I think they're just going to be very self-centered and they're not going to be aware of what it's like in the real world. And I think it's really healthy for them to see that. So that's really important to me, to make sure that while that was an obstacle, it's something that I have realized is not going to be an obstacle for me anymore.
And I think I'm sure you've picked up on all the stories of women who've had children and talked about, yes, it is something that you have to be aware of, but it should not stop you. And I think I came away from those, I don't have kids, that's not my path, but came away from that and my mom worked. So I know obviously you can be I went through being the child of a working mom. I know you can do it, but hearing them talk about it and hearing the ways that other people talk to them about having a kid and being a leader, that is like, you get it from all sides, right? Like you get the interviewer saying, how could you possibly give enough to this position because you have a child? You get it from the colleague down the hall who says you can't be a leader because you have the child. Like, it's just fascinating how many different...
Sorry. Just the fact that you're like not reliable, you're not professional enough, that you're not going to be able to go to the meetings after school, that you have to like be responsible to pick up your kids. And yeah, that's the frustrating thing, definitely. That's one of the things that I guess you have to overcome no matter what. But yeah, not letting that be a barrier, not letting other people's judgments be a barrier, and just proving them wrong is like something that I love to do. So I'm gonna
one of my favorites on that, if you haven't watched it yet, is Carla Marshall, and I forget how the like thread of this conversation went, but she's currently the director of teaching and learning at United World College in Singapore, and she talked about interviewing for a different position. I can't remember if this is like two separate things where she was pregnant two separate times interviewing. I can't remember how it all like merged together, but the way that she describes how she can manage her work and her home, and like so professionally and so eloquently, and so there is no discussion about this. I'm like, that everyone needs to talk about, not everyone, but if you can talk about your life in that way and so concretely, yes, it was just inspirational to me. Bianca, I don't know if you resonate with what Christina has already shared, or you have something else you wanted to point out in terms of what's been holding you back in terms of moving into that leadership position.
Yeah, so I'll extend the conversation a little bit about the family life a little bit. So I live on a boarding school campus, and so I mentioned this in our other conversation that I feel like I'm always at the interview, essentially, because you see everyone, right, in the canteen and on the weekend. And for me, they see me when I have my mom clothes on, or my mom voice, good moments and not so good moments. So that can be just overwhelming on the one hand. And then on the other side, you miss some of the informal networking and relationship building as a result. So, when the leadership team sit together at a meal, or, the head of school sitting alone, or I could go sit with him. Oh, he doesn't want to sit with a screaming child. Like, I don't want to, have food all over me when I'm having that conversation. So, my husband and my daughter used to come down to lunch, and because her nap schedule changed, it stopped. Luckily, to be honest, because otherwise at lunch, I was never available to talk to peers or anyone else, because I wanted to sit with them. And it was not pleasant sometimes to have that two worlds collide at lunch. So that was a thing, that I felt like that extra time, that networking, just that flexibility, like it is a barrier. True, you shouldn't let it be a barrier, but it is. And it's going to be once in a while, just to the extent to which, it becomes that way. So that's one thing I was going to say. And then another piece of the challenge, I thought that as something I thought about at the beginning of this conversation, was if I had known, so much was happenstance. Like I happened upon this, I happened upon that. But even if I had known at the beginning, at 20 or 19 years old, I'm going to go into international teaching, what would have really been different? I don't know that the path to leadership would have been any clearer. I don't know that, what would I have done? Gotten a master's in ed leadership right after my bachelor's, like boom, boom, boom. Would that have made a difference? Maybe that would have been detrimental, because I wouldn't have had any experience to go into that master's program with. So I don't really know what would have been different if I had known from the beginning, because in part the field is so transient, and as a result, knowledge moves and isn't like, you can't really like find it. You have like certain sources of information that are reliable, but they're so few, right? Like I guess some of the articles that come out on like TIE Online, that's like kind of an inside look on like what happens in schools and who's who and who's getting positions and whatnot. Or like the ISS newsletter, if you read them, you're, oh, so-and-so got this position and this is what this school is doing. Those are like the reputable sources of information in terms of like who is doing what in terms of school and people. But otherwise, it's more like informal, like reviews of schools, which is usually just people complaining, or like, recently, super recently, like maybe the past year or two, like some Facebook groups have emerged that have lots of, international teachers on them. So I feel like how to find information has always been gray. And then besides the information, there's like the relationship building and the networking. And so because the lifestyle is so transient, it's hard to build relationships, period. Like, just, I don't know who my friends are, to be honest. Like, my friends are all over the place. I know if I were to be back in whatever, in Nicaragua, I could call somebody up, we'll go out, and it'll be like, no time has passed. That's great. But like day to day, like, who am I going to coffee with on the weekends, or who, I don't know. I find friendships difficult to establish and maintain in this lifestyle. And as a result, networking and mentorship. A couple people in the course mentioned mentorship, but how do you even start that? You just tap someone and like, excuse me, can you be my mentor? That doesn't sound, maybe that's all it is, but that hasn't worked for me in the past. One time I thought I was getting close to a principal and they left. And then I left. In the other instance where like there could have been a match. Well, but you know what I mean? Like, there isn't a formal match process, but you feel like there's a vibe. Someone's interested in your development. They see, they give you some little responsibilities. They obviously trust in your ability or whatever. But then I move, they move. What? You don't really stay in touch. Everyone's got their own lives. So along that line, this was super helpful because it was that inside look. There was that, direct connection through you. So like, I can email you and I can ask you something. There was kind of that informal list of leaders who were willing to reach out and start that conversation. And then recently, like last week or so, I found out that I was accepted into the first mentor cohort of AIELOC. I didn't want to miss any letters. So Association of International Educators and Leaders of Color. So I wrote it down to make sure I didn't skip any of the long acronyms. So I'm super excited to roll that out and be part of that founding group. And hopefully, it's just about making those connections. I understand that, in terms of hiring at those upper levels, it's such a big decision, like for a school to commit to a principal or director of this or that, like they're really like putting a lot of trust in that person and bringing them in. So I understand that it's, I worked with them before, I know them, but it has become such a boys club. And they recycle the same couple of leaders. At the same token, there's so many schools. I don't know if you could really say that, but at the top schools anyways, it is such a tight-knit community. So on the one hand, it's a boys club that's really exclusive and maybe intentional. Maybe it's it's a big risk for a school to bring in anybody new. So of course, one ingredient in making that decision is, does anybody know this person? Oh, you do? Okay, great. Let's bring them on. So I think that being involved with any kind of community of female leaders helps build that. So now if I reach out to, whoever, maybe they'll have seen my name before and I'm not just a rando. Whether or not it's a female on the hiring committee, they will work with the female and they'll say, what do you think about these resumes? Oh, this name is familiar. I saw them in this, whatever. So it's just about, I think, visibility and making those connections. And there are some avenues that are now, like this mentorship, this Women Who Lead program, avenues to facilitate that relationship building, because if left to its own, as it's done for, some of these schools have been around 60, 70 years, and historically they are white males in leadership positions. So if it were left to run its course without any intentional planning or intervention, it would continue or be a trickle pace. But when you can embed these kinds of programs and pathways, then maybe some of these challenges can change. So like I said, even if I had known what I wanted in the beginning, I don't think it's a matter of time. I think it's a matter of like the path isn't clear. And maybe it's more clear for men because they make those connections more easily. But, it's interesting, Christina, you said something about starting your program, how you want a principalship and that it's going to take time. And I thought to myself, would a man think that it takes a long time? They would just like jump, and we have both mentioned in our conversations about needing to develop skills and digging in and exploring more. I think in one of your resources, Kim, in one of the segments, there was an article or something about how men just apply for positions, even if they don't meet all the requirements, they just dive right in, and women like need to check every box before they're willing to submit an application. So it's the same thing. Like, would a man think like, oh, I'm not ready for this yet, I shouldn't start it? But female thinks we should, keep growing. Maybe I should be a department chair another couple of years. I'm not really there yet. So I just wonder how that mentality got started, and if as a result of that, that's where that slow trickle comes from. Will these sorts of programs help, hasten the pace at which females develop and take the leap? So lots to be seen, but I'm really excited that these kinds of conversations and programs are opening up, and we'll see how the industry changes in another 50, 60 years and what it looks like.
Oh my gosh, so much to unpack there. I feel like we could talk about everything you just said for like another hour, and there's some weird loud construction going on in the apartment next door to me, so I hope that's not too loud for you guys. But so a couple of things that you said there that really jumped out at me, and I think the one is the feeling that sense of isolation and finding your network and being able to find that network when you don't have anyone in the space that you're in and people are moving around so often. I mean, that is huge. And then the other piece of those that do have the network, it's just they stay in those same circles at the very top level of school leadership. How do you break it? So many women talked about how do you break into that conversation? It's not welcoming. It's not open. I mean, there are a few of the very top level men in international schools that have been super welcoming to me. And I will never forget those people, because the difference that you feel with that person compared to the other, let's say 100 people in the room, it's massive. And it is, how do you break into that? There's no entry point. And so I appreciate this thought about networking and building your connections to also kind of build your confidence, because you don't have to wait till you tick all the boxes, right? Like that. Yeah, that's not huge.
I mean, just the feeling of like, am I ready? Or how do I develop? I don't have anyone. You barely have teachers who get like a formal observation that's any help. Formal observations are like, let's just check some boxes. There's like such a missed opportunity for feedback and growth and reflection. Oh my gosh, that separate conversation. But it's like, I forget what the exact quote was in one of Brene Brown's books, and she talks about like the 4 corners or something, and like the people you have to have on your team, and someone who lifts you up, and someone who gives you helpful criticism, and someone else. And I forget what it was, but I was like, I don't have any of these people in my phone. I don't have any of these relationships of who is going to really take the time to give me that critical feedback. And I mean, when I ask for it, it's, can I have feedback on this? What do you think about this? How can I grow in this area? It's not like a focused conversation. It's not really intentional, and it hasn't been helpful. So it's kind of hit or miss. Like when you do seek it out, is it helpful? And not really, not that they're being unhelpful on purpose, like wanting to hold the secrets of the leadership treasure box or something like that. But I don't know, maybe they don't know how to give feedback. They've got other things going on. The people that we seek out support and mentorship from and guidance are really busy people. So it's even harder to build those relationships with busy people. So unless we find a trove of retired school leaders who are inclusive-minded, where are they all retired on? What island have they escaped off to? So I don't know.
I actually think that's not a bad idea. And part of the reason I'm saying that is because I spoke to Jo Ellen Killian, who's not in the series yet because I haven't edited her videos, but she will be soon. And when we had our conversation, she talked about not having a specific mentor or series of mentors, but she had a circle of women that she kind of grew professionally with. And she's not the only person who talked about that. Grace McCallum, who's currently at Frankfurt International School, said the same thing. Jo Ellen Killian is retired. That's why I mentioned her. So more than one person said that same concept of like this circle of women. And I thought to myself, like you, I don't have this circle of women. Like I want this circle. Like, how do I build this circle of women? So I'm very grateful that we are going to do a podcast episode with her circle of women and talk about how they built that and what they got out of it. Because I think maybe coming from Women Who Lead, you won't have one specific mentor. Maybe the people on the list don't click with you and you don't want to work with them, and that's totally fine. But maybe there'll be a way for each of you to build your circle of women. Like you can reach out to this person who's in the program and this person who's featured as an interviewee, and you can build your circle of women, because I don't think we can do it alone. And I think you do have to have the vision and purpose for what you want to do. But like, just like you're talking about the Brene Brown reference, having those people in your corner, in your circle, is going to make a huge impact. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you are ready to leverage your leadership potential and build your network of inspiring female leaders in education, please join us for our next global cohort of Women Who Lead. Women Who Lead is our online certificate program designed for aspiring and growing leaders, featuring the voices and experience of over 70 successful female leaders from around the world. Inside Women Who Lead, you will build the confidence, competence, and clarity you need to take the next step in your leadership journey. Imagine applying and interviewing for your dream job without imposter syndrome holding you back. Imagine handling difficult conversations without all the anxiety and stress. Imagine being able to manage all the competing demands of a busy leadership role while maintaining a sense of wellness in your life. And having dozens of examples of how women in all facets of leadership have handled the challenges and barriers we all face when pursuing a leadership pathway. You'll leave Women Who Lead empowered by your own identity and able to see how your unique life experience make you the leader that schools need. Registration for our next global cohort is only open from the 2nd to the 16th of May. We facilitate only one cohort each year so we can create connected, collaborative, and community-driven global cohorts. Now is your chance to level up your leadership and reach for your dream job. Join Women Who Lead today. Go to edurolearning.com/women to find out more. Here at Eduro, we provide customized online professional learning for educators at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Our mission is to empower the relentless learner in you to embrace your inner leader and make a bigger impact in your school setting. Join our Coach Better Facebook group and connect with us on social media at Eduro Learning for more great resources at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.